Welcome back to another semester and a new decade of Jacket Sports Weekly, where we sit down every week and cover everything Waynesburg University athletics right now in the height of winter sports season.
Yeah, the basketball teams both with multi-game losing streaks, but they'll need some wins to make a push for the PAC tournament and seeding in that tournament coming up. Also, the wrestling team is in action, a big senior night win last week, and the indoor track and field teams continuing their seasons as well.
I'm Jack Hillgrove.
And I'm Dylan Cleland.
And it's time for another decade of Jacket Sports Weekly. Over the last 4 doubleheaders for both basketball teams, 8 games, 7 of them between the men and women have been losses. And we'll start with the team that, after riding a 4-game winning streak, now rides a 4-game losing streak, the men's basketball team. Jack Hillgrove alongside Dylan Cleland. Dylan, a 4-game losing streak for the men's basketball team, losses to Bethany, Chatham, Grove City, and most recently Westminster.
Yeah, and prior to that, it was a 4-game win streak, which really turned things around, and things were looking great for the men's basketball team, but suffering those losses most recently, as you said, to Westminster, 73-58 defeat on Saturday. Brennan Smith had 17 points, 3 rebounds. He was 2 for 2 with the charity stripe. Isaiah Alonzo, 15 points, 11 rebounds, only 2 fouls, but I want to take a minute and point out he's gotten into foul trouble a couple of games, and that's really hurt the Jackets down low. When he's there and he can play underneath, he makes his presence felt, and he's been a very big attribute for this Waynesburg team. However, foul trouble, as we know in basketball, can be a bad thing, and that's something he's dealt with. Another thing that's hurt Waynesburg throughout the season, poor shooting. Now, they're getting good looks, and this is what's kind of confusing, and I think what Coach Fusina is really having a tough time figuring out. They're getting good looks, and a lot of them just aren't falling. They shot under 31% against Chatham last Wednesday, and they shot a lot better, 41%. From the field on Saturday against Westminster. But right now, shots not falling, but if you keep that good shot selection up, good things will eventually come.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to what you touched upon on Isaiah Alonzo. Obviously, the big recruit that Tim Fusina brought in his first year, a 6'10" forward, who has struggled a little bit in the foul department. To put it in perspective, in the Bethany matchup, the first loss, riding into a 4-game winning streak into enemy territory, but the worst team in the PAC at that time and losing. Alonzo only had 2 fouls in that game and had 16 points and 15 rebounds. Now, more recently, Chatham of last week, he fouled out, had 8 points. So obviously, it is no secret that when Isaiah Alonzo stays out of foul trouble, he is more productive, and that's usually it for every basketball player. And also, just a little bit more of a perspective overall, the last 4 games for the men's basketball team. In its last 4 losses, averaging 52.3 points per game and shooting around 39.4%, 20 turnovers in each of the games as well. And that has been the Achilles heel of this basketball team as of late as well, turning the basketball over.
Yeah, the run bright point, though, going forward, the defense has been strong throughout the season. That's Coach Fusina's big thing, and it's been coming along. If that strong defense holds up, hopefully the offense will come along.
Switching to the women's basketball team, now a 3-game losing streak, most recently losing to a Westminster team on the road this Saturday, a 4-point loss, and that one really boiled down to 1 quarter of play for the Jackets, being outscored 25-16 in the second quarter, also having 20 turnovers against the Titans as well.
Turnovers is one of the things that's been a continual Achilles heel for this team. 42 turnovers over the last 2 games, 20, as you said, and then 22 on Wednesday night against Chatham. And so for this team, if that can continue to get better, I think that that's a big part of it. Also, though, Westminster, or offensively against Westminster, Allie Delaney leading Jacket scorers with 16 points, 4 rebounds. It's good to see some new faces. Her and Casey Castro both leading the way. For a while, it was Brooke Fuller, and don't count her out. She had 14 points as well against Westminster in the loss. But it's good to see some different faces. There's only 9 girls in this roster, so
Mm-hmm.
Going to have some other girls step up in the scoring department.
Yeah, and that's been an issue with the men's team as well. Depth and load production from each team. Like going back to the men momentarily, Cam Ald and Ryan Felberg, a freshman, playing 40 minutes a game, and a senior and Sam Heater only seeing 5. And you see that issue with the women's team, not just because of load management, but they only have 9 players, as Dylan alluded to. And going back to that Chatham loss last week as well, the two-headed monster and leaders in scoring, number 1 and number 2, Emily Ondo and Kayla Fairtig for Chatham, combined for 33 points. But Fuller and Delaney in that loss combined for 34, so perhaps you might see a little bit of a combination. Down low scoring with Brooke Fuller, on the perimeter with Allie Delaney might serve well for the Jackets in the next coming weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely a bright spot again, and this team always shoots well at the free throw line too. You have to take advantage of that. Right now they're shooting 73% at the line, and so if that continues for Waynesburg, I think there's a possibility for some advancement. You still have a little less than half the conference schedule the second time around to go, so there's definitely some room for the Jackets to move up the standings before PAC tournament time.
Right, and not a lot of success between the basketball teams as of late. Hopefully that changes, but let's transition to a team that, to no surprise, is succeeding. The Waynesburg Wrestlers on the mat this week on senior night this past Saturday against Teal, a 26-12 win. They were down 9-3 at one point, and Josh Kozlock kind of turned the tide for the team with a pin at the 149-pound division.
Yeah, he did. And this team, let's go back to the beginning of the season. We were concerned, will this team be able to compete with or beat W&J? And Teal is the only other team in the PAC that has a wrestling team. And Waynesburg beat them both. They're 2-0. And so I think congratulations goes out to them for being able to fill those roles. But let's dive a little bit deeper into that match. It was a 26-12 win. Kuzlok had a big pin. It was tied 9-9 after 4 matches. And then 3 wins in a row for Waynesburg. Colby Morris defeats Austin Bonassi 4-2, and that makes it 12-9. And then Zach Mackel defeats Peyton Hearn. And then Dylan Charlton on senior night, a major decision. I think this was one of the bigger turning points. It made it 20-9 at this point. He had a 12-2 win over Josh Christner. And so that's a big turn of events when you can have multiple matches in a row go your way. You kind of flip the tide, and I think that's kind of what happened for Waynesburg. They celebrated 5 seniors that night, and 3 of them came away victorious in matches that really had a large meaning.
Yeah, after that Kuzlok pin, winning 6 of the final 7 matches of the matchup against Teal, including, as you mentioned, a Zach Mackel major decision against a former Division I wrestler, and Rocky McGeary, who has been quite the replacement, not to that level yet of Jake Evans at the heavyweight class. Hopefully the next couple of years we can see that production from Rocky McGeary. But if you would have told me at the beginning of this year that you would have got pretty close production at the 285 to Jake Evans the last 4 years, I would have said you were crazy. But Rocky McGeary as a freshman has been outstanding and has a legitimate opportunity to be a PAC champion at the end of this year.
Absolutely he does, and he's not alone either with that freshman class. Harley Constable had a big win at the 133 weight class on Friday night to start things off, and he's kind of come on as the season has developed. But McGeary came out of the gates, and we were like, wow, this guy could definitely make a run to try to not replace Jake Evans. You can't replace someone like that, but step into that role and do as much of it with what they can. And so I think he has a good opportunity to be a PAC champion. That'll result in him going to regionals. And so after that, you really don't know what could happen for this Waynesburg wrestling team, who has had success in the past. Coach Ron Headley has been there before. He knows how to do it from the coaching perspective. And right now, he's got a very well-oiled machine in this wrestling team.
It's almost as if Ron Headley's a pretty good coach. Well, that's all from us. When we come back on Jacket Sports Weekly, we will sit down with our analysts. The first one, Tanner Soprowski. He'll talk about the men's basketball team. You're watching Jacket Sports Weekly.
You know what that means. Time to party. Sam is having a good time, watching sports, drinking beer, playing Pong. Not a care in the world for Sam. Nobody at the party stopped Sam. They let him walk out the door with his keys, even though he was stumbling, having a hard time to stand up. What happened less than 10 minutes later would change Sam's life forever.
We're back on Jacket Sports Weekly. It's time to dive a little bit deeper into Jacket Sports. We'll start with men's basketball and our men's basketball analyst, Tanner Saprowski. Tanner, this team has struggled as of late, but what are your general thoughts on them as they head into a couple of big games coming up?
Yeah, the 4-game losing streak that's been very detrimental to the season so far, especially because they started out on such a high note to start PAC play. But coming up, they have games against Geneva, they're currently in 4th, so that might be a little bit tough game for them. But then they have W&J, St. Vincent, Teal, and Bethany, which in my opinion, I think those are all winnable games. Waynesburg defeated Teal earlier on in the season with a big home crowd. And that's another thing. The men's team, they started off hot, and now they're getting a lot of attention around campus. They're starting to be talked about more on Twitter. More fans are starting to come to the game. That's definitely helping them. And if they continue to win, it's going to get louder and more exciting in there. So I think Waynesburg right now, they have to win the games that they should win and stay competitive in some of those tougher games to stay confident for the rest of the season.
And I agree with you that those games are winnable games. Like earlier in the season, the Washington and Jefferson game, down 14 at half, winning by 15. That second half was as dominant as basketball and I've seen in 3 years covering this men's team. What do you think that the men need to do to get back to playing that kind of basketball like they did in the second half against Washington and Jefferson and the second half against Geneva earlier this year?
I think the biggest thing that I've noticed, especially the last 2-3 games, is whenever they're starting off the games hot, but whenever they start losing and they get down on the scoreboard, they start to kind of panic a little bit, where their offense isn't as strong as it was either in the first half or the first couple minutes of the game. So they need to settle down on offense, get the ball into the right people's hands, make those open shots that you guys mentioned earlier, and continue to rebound and stay strong on defense.
Thank you, Tanner, for your men's basketball analysis. Now we'll switch gears and bring in our women's basketball analyst, Caleb Yager. Caleb, thank you for joining us. This women's team, 3 straight losses, but there are some things going well. What have you observed?
Well, they recently just played Westminster, and they only lost 76-72 against a very good Westminster team. They're at the top of the PAC, which is given a sign of hope for the Yellow Jackets. And recently they did play Chatham, and they did compete with them at least in the first half. Obviously in the second half they kind of lost their momentum there, but definitely positive signs for the Lady Jackets.
Now, we're talking about this women's basketball team. Allie Delaney sort of coming alive here and becoming one of the leading scorers with Brooke Fuller. And we noted earlier in the show talking about how Brooke Fuller is specializing in the inside game, Allie Delaney in the outside game. Do you see that furthering and further developing, I should say, as the season progresses and maybe could rattle off a playoff win perhaps?
Yes, I think that duo right there is a very dangerous duo. Obviously, feeding Brooke Fuller inside, you got to get into her inside, and once she's hot, she's hot. And also feeding it to Allie Delaney. Whenever she's hot, and feeding those two on a good day, and just if they rally together, they can really produce some points and produce some quality minutes for the Lady Jackets.
Now, when you look at this team from the turnover perspective, that's been another thing that's really ailed them this year. What do you see, and do you think it can get better?
Yes, throughout this season, Sam Jones has really stressed the turnovers, and the turnovers, they're last in the PAC in the turnover margin. That's how bad it has been for the Lady Jackets. And going into the next game against Geneva, they need to limit their turnovers. And he actually told me before a game that he just asked them to cut their mistakes in half. And looking at Westminster, only losing 76-72, they had 20 turnovers. And can you imagine if they limited the turnovers there, how more competitive that game could have been?
Give us one key to the Geneva game this week.
Going into the game, simply outscoring their opponent, going to shoot well. They beat them earlier in the season, so they're definitely capable of beating them. I think it's really important for the Jackets to get this win and not go into the weekend, so they're having the weekend off. You should not go into the weekend knowing that you lost to a team that you could have beat. So I think just going to the game, play with intensity, getting the win in order to start fresh next week.
Very good point. Thank you, Caleb. The basketball teams will take on Geneva Wednesday, and they will have the weekend off. So we'll see what transpires with that. When we come back, we'll talk to our wrestling and track analysts here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Later on in this segment, you'll hear from Jesse Kane talking about the indoor track and field teams, what they've been up to. But for right now, we will look at the road ahead for the Waynesburg Wrestlers. And with doing that, we throw it to our wrestling analyst and former wrestler, Riley Holsinger. Riley, thanks for joining us. Talk about the Baldwin Wallace Invitational coming up this weekend, and you said that it's really not something to look into all that much.
Yeah, don't buy too much stock into the Baldwin Wallace tournament. To be honest, a lot of guys on the team are going to skip out on the tournament, and I was one of those guys last year too. Wrestling's a long and tough and brutal season, so when you can get a break, you try and take it, and especially with it being 1 week before PACs, everybody wants to rest up and heal up.
So, Riley, taking a look at this team, 5 seniors on it. A lot of them had some big wins last Friday. How do you see these guys kind of finishing out their careers with PACs coming up in a week?
You know how I feel about this, Dylan. I think they're going to be President's Athletic Conference champs for 4 straight years. I don't think they're going to lose one. This team's too talented, top to bottom, even with a lot of the younger guys like Harley Constable, Colby Morris, and then Rocky McGeary. And then you sprinkle in some of those seniors like Dan Verhosick, Dylan Charlton, Matt Lascola. This team has a lot of talent in it from top to bottom that you've seen in the dual matches that they competed hard against W&J and Teal, and they dominated both of those matchups.
Dylan and I were talking earlier in the episode about how if you would have told us at the beginning of the season that this wrestling team would have a chance based on what it's lost at the PAC championship this year, would have said you were crazy. But now it's looking like a legitimate possibility. What has changed? Is it just the coaching expertise of Ron Headley, or is it people stepping up that we didn't expect, or is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both there, but it's mainly because W&J, what we call in the wrestling community for them is Murderers Row with Hunter Neely, Mike Heinel, and Jared Walker. They're really banged up right now, especially Neely and Walker, and they're a tough presence to deal with on the Presidents, whereas on the Yellow Jackets squad, I mean, it's an emergence of all the young guys like Harley Constable, who nobody kind of really expected him to come in here and be as dominant as he was. And then it's been tough too with like Dylan Williams. He's been out for most of the season. Josh Kuslock, he's hurt again. But you've had people like Colby Morris who's been able to come in and really replace him well. And you can't dismiss Rocky McGeary. He's been a solid presence in the absence of Jake Evans.
Riley, thank you. We look forward to seeing the results of the wrestling tournament this weekend, and of course, looking forward towards the President's Athletic Conference Championships as well. Now we transition to a sport that Dylan and I did not cover earlier on in the show, talking about the indoor track and field team, and of course, a lot of success going on with them, and of course, the PAC Championships coming up with the indoor track and field team as well. With that, we bring in our track and field analyst, Jesse Kane. Jesse, talk about, since Dylan and I didn't get a chance to, talk about what's been going on with the indoor track and field team.
Yeah, so the indoor track and field had a meet this past weekend, Youngstown Invitational. There was no team scoring, but mini jackets shined. Eric Townsend, freshman from James River High in Virginia, ran both the 60-meter and 200-meter, finished in the top half of both of those. But the most outstanding event for Townsend was the long jump, where he placed first out of all Division III athletes with a jump of 22 feet, 2 inches and a quarter. As I said, this was top of all Division III athletes there and puts him first in the PAC. For the women, sophomore Aubrey Wingert put up good times in the 5,000-meter event, placing fifth with a time of 18 minutes and 23 seconds, as well as running a time of 2 minutes and 25 seconds in the 800-meter, placing 17th in the meet. She currently holds the second fastest time in the PAC. The women's 4x4 team currently holds the third fastest time in the conference after running a time of 4 minutes and 27 seconds this past weekend. Catherine Henderson, the rookie out of 100 West Virginia, continues jumping strong. She placed second out of the Division III athletes that showed at the meet with a leap of 4 feet and 11 inches in long jump. The Jackets indoor track and field will appear next Saturday. It's February 8th, 10 a.m. in the Jim Wusk Invitational, hosted by the University of Mount Union.
So heading into that one, great information, by the way. It's good to get catch everything up there. Real quick, though, one key for that next Invitational, it could be for one team or both.
The men's track side, their track events have really struggled. They have Eric Townsend and Jawan Jones, which are really the only ones placing close to 20 this past Invitational. Of course, there was there's a lot of competition in the Invitational. This meet that's coming up, there will be 6 PAC teams there, so you'll see a lot more of what we see in the conference and how competitive the indoor track and field team will be.
When we come back on Jacket Sports Weekly, Nolan Porterfield will sit down with communications student and women's basketball player Brooke Fuller. Stay with us on JSW.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly. I am Nolan Porterfield, and joining me from the women's basketball team is sophomore center Brooke Fuller. Brooke, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, one thing I noticed from a big improvement from last year, your freshman year, to this year is your points per game has increased. Last year you were averaging 10. This year you're averaging 15, almost 16, as you pointed out to me before. So, no sophomore slump for you. What has improved your game over the last year that's helped you so much with your success?
I've definitely focused a lot more about basketball. Definitely getting in the weight room. I feel like I've settled into my role now as a teammate. Last year I was a freshman, so all the players in the PAC were new to me. Now this year I know all the stuff that they do. I know who I'm guarding. It's a lot easier to play against conference teams and know what to expect.
Absolutely. So, one thing I want to talk about in your 2 seasons at WU, how has Coach Jones and the coaching staff to help you improve your game?
So in high school I really didn't get the one-on-one time that I get now with Coach Pioch joining the staff. He definitely helps me, different moves even that I didn't have last year. They definitely work on stuff that they see as a weakness, and that has helped me improve so much over the last year.
And you also talked about how you're getting the weight room. How's your teammates helped out with that?
We're definitely a lot more focused, especially even when we go for team lifts. We all are very focused in. And although it doesn't show in our record, we're still a very competitive team. And this team has improved so much. And even we help each other out. We keep each other focused, keep our heads up. On the court, when someone makes a bad pass or something, we'll all go over now and be like, it's okay, next play, next play.
That's great to hear, obviously. So now, we talked about this a little bit outside of, obviously, the interview and such, about, how the team's kind of been shifting players in and out. Obviously, some players started the year out. Now they're not here. Some players left halfway through the year. So when you have, I guess, what you would call a revolving door of players, how has the chemistry been between you and your teammates? And how has it stayed up, or how is it?
Since we're a smaller team, obviously, we have so much chemistry. Even I don't go maybe 5 hours without being with my team. We all eat lunch together, we all eat dinner together, we're all with each other 24/7, and when we're not with each other, we're always talking to each other, texting and stuff like that. And I think that shows on the court. I know that my teammates will celebrate for each other, and they'll be very excited. I know that my teammates will be there for me, and I'm there for them, and we're all there for each other, and I feel like we have so much chemistry on the court, and that is also, I have such good friendships with them off the court too.
So how's the coaching staff dealt with players coming in and out of the lineup? How have they tried to adjust, having one player may be here one day and then gone the next? How have they dealt with that? Do you think they've handled it well?
I'm sure they're very frustrated, just because we started out with, I think, 13, 12 girls, and now we're down to 9. We had a transfer come in, but, what's meant to be is meant to be. The players that are here are the players that are here to play for the rest of the season, and then that's all we can worry about is who we have now.
All right, so big conference matchup on Wednesday against Geneva. What do the Ladies Jays have to do to take down the Golden Tornadoes?
Same thing as last time. We really worked together to bring them down as a team. Everyone had a stellar game that game, and I feel like that's the game that really brought us together and took a weight off our shoulders. We finally got a conference win.
All right, so we're going to move away from basketball here and talk a little bit about your academics. What's your major, and what are your plans for the future?
So I'm a sports broadcasting major. Plans for the future, honestly, if I ever had the opportunity to play overseas, I know that's a very slim chance, but I would definitely take that because I can't imagine my life without basketball. But if that is not the case, then I really want to get into women's basketball, announcing that, and then radio announcing. I have so much fun just watching basketball. I just want to stay involved in sports as long as I can, and that'll help me being a sports broadcasting major.
Is there a dream job that you have, one day I see myself doing this? Do you have a dream job?
ESPN anchor, for sure.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. All right, that's good to hear. So, I want to thank you for your time, obviously, and good luck the rest of the way this year.
Thank you.
When we come back, Jack and Dylan will give you your top 5 athletes of the week. Keep it right here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Time to wrap things up on Jacket Sports Weekly with our top 5 athletes of the week. Jack, who do you have?
Sure. Number 5 on my top 5 athletes of the week, the first one of the decade. I have Eric Townsend. He finished in the top half of both the events he competed in, the 60-meter and the 200-meter dashes this past weekend at Youngstown State University, a big meet for the indoor track and field team, as always, every year. Number 4, I had Isaiah Alonso, the men's basketball team, averaging 11.5 points per game and averaging 7 rebounds per game this past week for the Woo Ballers. Number 3, Aubrey Wingart. She finished 5th in the 5,000 meters with a time of 18 minutes, 23 seconds. And 17th place overall in the 800 meter as well. Number 2, you just heard from her, Brooke Fuller of the women's basketball team, averaging 16.5 points and 11 rebounds per game this past week, shooting 55.5% from the field as well, which is a very big number. And number 1, Zach Mackel of the wrestling team, giving a Division I wrestler, Division I transfer, I should say, his first loss of the season, a big win for the wrestling team here at Waynesburg as well.
Mine are all different, which is a little bit different than usual, but that means it's been a pretty good week in Jacket Athletics. Let's start with my number 5, freshman Catherine Henderson of the women's indoor track and field team. A strong showing this past weekend and throughout the season so far. She finished second among all Division III participants at the meet with a 1.45 meter jump. My number 4, Rocky McGeary, the wrestler, the freshman. He's been outstanding. 10-3 win on Friday against Teal. He's moved into the heavyweight role very, very well. He's probably going to make a push for regionals and, dare I even say it, maybe even nationals. Senior Allie Delaney, she had a big game. That's my number 3 one. She had a big game for the Lady Jackets against Westminster on Saturday with 16 points. At times, she's struggled to find her role, but coming on strong as of late for Waynesburg. Number 2, the senior for the men's basketball team, Brennan Smith, led the Jackets with 17 points and second in rebounds last week against Chatham. A good senior season for him, continuing to help the Jackets play strong defensively as well. And my number 1 will go with some more wrestling. Senior Dylan Charlton, a 12-2 convincing win on senior night in front of a home crowd, helped his team get to the team score to 20-9, and I think that's the one that really sealed the deal for the Jackets to become the PAC regular season champions. It's been a couple of weeks since we've recapped Jacket Athletics, Jack, but we have to say there's been a lot going on, and things are really looking up for Waynesburg Athletics.
Yeah, in the coming weeks, PAC championship opportunities for all the winter sports teams, the playoffs for the basketball teams, and, of course, the wrestling and the indoor track as well. Exciting couple of weeks ahead.
Well, he's Jack Hillgrove. I'm Dylan Cleland. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure you catch up with us again next week for the latest in Jacket Sports.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.